Hello and welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast, brought to you by Recovery.com, the best place to find mental health and addiction treatment for anyone, anywhere.
Each week, we profile a guest who shares openly about their mental health journey. They share because they understand that when people don't talk about their depression or other mental health conditions, those of us who do struggle with them can feel like we're the only ones, that there's something wrong with us and that no one understands. We understand.
I'm Terry McGuire, the creator and co-host of this podcast. You have my promise that we'll keep it real here. Depression is real, and we're not going to sugarcoat our discussions about it.
Hope is also real, and you'll get a dose of that here too. I'm Carly McCullough, a licensed social worker and educator, and Terry's daughter. We've both experienced depression and also support loved ones struggling with it. We're here to normalize talking about depression and mental health in our communities, as well as our families.
And to share real-world tested strategies that have worked for other people who have walked similar paths. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Carly. So each of the 5 Tuesdays this month, Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, we have heard deeply personal, firsthand stories from suicide loss and suicide attempt survivors. This is the final episode in our series.
The grief that follows a suicide is unique and complex. It's often layered with guilt, trauma, and a pervasive sense of what if and why. Our guest today, Lisa Silverman, knows this all too well. Having lost her father, cousin, and a close friend to suicide, she's dedicated her life to helping others navigate this difficult journey. We'll be talking about her personal experience, how to support someone who has lost a loved one, and why understanding this kind of grief is so essential.
Here now is Lisa, giving her voice to depression. So as we begin a discussion about suicide, which can be a triggering topic, it can be an unfamiliar, it can be uncomfortable, and it's essential. For someone who may only listen to the first minute or two of this episode, what are you hoping that they understand as a result of hearing some of your story and what you've learned?
Honestly, I just hope that anyone who's listening who has experienced any kind of this type of loss, whether they are maybe a survivor of an attempt, or maybe they're surviving the loss of someone they love from suicide, I just want people to understand that they're not alone. It's such an isolating experience, but you're not alone. There are so many people who've been impacted by suicide loss. People just don't talk about it.
Right.
The second thing is help is out there. Even if you're someone who says, I don't have a family, I don't have a friend circle, I don't have a support system, you're not alone. There are crisis lifelines and support groups and ways to get the kind of support that you need, even if you don't have your own community to reach out to.
In somebody who lives with depression, it's not like I'm thinking, okay, I'm having these thoughts. I recognize them as a symptom because you don't when you're in it. And I'm going to access help. I'm going to do a little bit of research here and find out what's available to me. Like those two things don't go together in my mind. Like
No.
you need to know beforehand. And, like this exists. 988 exists. Other things exist. And that's a hard thing because you're not interested until you need it. And then maybe you're least able to access it or believe it would work anyway.
Yeah, that's the mentality of someone who's in the thick of depression. It's a very, very dark place to be. And it's a place that doesn't lend itself to doing much work. It doesn't lend itself to asking the right questions. I mean, your brain is hijacked. Mm-hmm. So you're not thinking clearly. You're not making rational decisions. You're, in some cases, not making any decisions at all. So yes. It's important that anyone out there who might be struggling with anything, with any kind of a crisis, understands where they can get help before they're in a situation where they're desperate and they need help.
What are some of those places that somebody who is thinking about suicide or has suffered the loss of somebody in their life by suicide, where can they go and what are what's the crib sheet, the short notes on how to get the help you might need, the support you might need to talk to somebody who gets it?
Yeah, that's the best place that anyone can call and reach out to is the 988 crisis and suicide hotline. That is, I don't want to say the end all be all, because it certainly is not. There are so many organizations out there who are offering very specific types of support services and crisis management. But in terms of kind of a catch-all, 988 is the number that every single person, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be dealing with, needs to have on their brain, in their pocket, in their phone, on the fridge, wherever they can, to make sure that they have it when they need it the most. I would say reach out to the crisis text line if that's an option that suits you a little bit better. There are a lot of people who are terrified at the idea of picking up the phone and using their real voice to talk to a real human.
Or being overheard doing it.
Exactly, exactly. So texting kind of gives you a little bit of a buffer and a little bit of a separation for people who might not want to dive right into a phone call or a conversation like that.
And there is an option to text 988, correct?
There is an option to text 988. People can go to 988.org and find all the information about the different ways to reach out to a counselor.
So one of the things that's interesting is we keep reading, hearing, seeing suicide rates are up, suicide rates are up. Nobody ever acknowledges that also means that the amount of suicide loss survivors are up and the people who are impacted by that loss. And I would like to speak today specifically to and about loss survivors, but also to that group of people who can do a much better job supporting someone who is carrying that unique grief.
What people don't realize, I'm really glad you brought that up, because what people don't realize is that for every one suicide that occurs in the world, 135 people are impacted. That means their friend circle, their family circle, their acquaintances. That's a big number. And because suicide is such a nuanced type of loss, people need something very specific in terms of grief and loss support. And that's not something that generalized grief support can often give you. You need someone who understands that kind of loss.
Lisa understands that kind of loss. She first experienced it when she was just 9 years old.
So my cousin, who lived about a half a mile up the street, took his life. I was told that it was a suicide. My parents, even, we're talking now the late 1970s, my parents were very progressive in that way. And they did find a gentle way of sharing with me that my cousin's brain was sick and that he had died by suicide. And so I understood that from a really young age.
However, just a year later, when her father took his own life, progressive gave way to protective. Lisa was told he died of a heart attack.
He was a very, very active man, but he also smoked very, very heavily. And I knew that heart attacks ran in his family, and it wasn't a stretch. Trying to understand that my father's heart stopped didn't take much effort. It was a terrible, horrible, awful thing, but it made sense. And there was nothing to question, and I never did. I had no reason to.
Right.
So that was the narrative that I lived with for most of my life, and I'm so grateful to her. I have always only been just eternally grateful to her for being able to shield me from that.
It was decades before Lisa accidentally discovered the truth. How are the two griefs different? I mean, we all lose people. How is the grief of losing someone by suicide different, and how did it hit differently even that many years later?
Suicide's a funny animal in that way. It's a very unique and nuanced kind of grief, because you have elements of a suicide grief that don't exist with traditional loss.
100%.
You have the guilt, oftentimes, depending on how the person took their life. It could be incredibly traumatic. You might have that feeling of, what could I have said? What could I have done? You have that feeling sometimes, how did I miss the signs? That guilt piece can be huge with so many people. So it's very difficult, very, very difficult when all of a sudden you're a suicide loss survivor and you don't know what that means, because it's a very, very exclusive club. and nobody wants to be a member of it. And nobody knows how to be a member of it for a very long time.
As a member, Lisa has learned a lot about what she calls the very unique and nuanced grief of suicidal loss. So let's pull back from your personal story and talk about how someone can support someone who has lost a loved one, anyone that affects them by death by suicide. What are things that are helpful and supportive to say, and what are things you should stay the hell away from?
Well, saying things like, I'm here, I care, I want to listen, let's talk, what do you need? Those are the things you want to be saying.
Yes.
How can I help? Would it be helpful to you if we talked about your person? Mm-hmm. Or if we didn't talk about your person? Those are the things that you want to be saying. I wouldn't ever ask someone to give you details of how someone took their life. I would stay away from passing any kind of judgment whatsoever. Don't push. Don't be inclined to feel like you have to be doing all the talking. Just be there to listen. That's the most powerful thing that anyone can actually do, is to hold space for someone who's lost someone like that.
Even the seemingly neutral question, like, weren't there any signs, implies either you missed them or you didn't. I mean, there are so many things that are internalized so differently than you may mean.
Yeah, we can do a lot more damage than we realize we can do. Like, for instance, another thing you would never want to say is, I bet you feel so guilty.
Well,
I mean, you might as well just punch someone directly in the face, because that can be so unbelievably hurtful to someone who is, of course, feeling some degree of guilt. Just really try and be as neutral and open-minded and non-judgmental as you can be. It's all any of us can do to really support someone, because what someone needs is so subjective.
yes. And that's why you worded all the things you said before as questions, which I think is the way it should be done, because there can be people who, any loss, loss of someone by any means, you want their name brought up. You're not reminding me I lost somebody. I never, ever, ever forget.
So I know in my own life how valuable it is to me, how helpful it is to me when someone asks about my dad.
Yeah.
When someone mentions my dad's name, and it brings him back.
Yes.
A little bit for me each time someone mentions his name, or it's a gift to me if someone shares a story with me that I didn't know. That's a gift.
Yes.
People just have this instinct that, ooh, I don't want to say anything because if I bring it up, it's going to be triggering and it's going to be hard. Well, that person will probably find a way to tell you if they don't want to talk about it. But in my own experience, both myself and with so many other survivors who I know, because I'm connected to so many survivors now in my life, almost everyone universally wants to be able to talk about their person in some way.
Other than a conversation, are there any things that you know as a lost survivor that really would have helped when you found out that somebody who hasn't had that experience might not know?
I think if I had known about the 988 crisis lifeline, that would have been so powerful for me, just knowing that I could use that lifeline to just have a conversation about the way I was feeling. Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that the 988 Lifeline is not just a suicide hotline. You don't have to just be in a suicidal state of mind, having ideation or contemplating the act itself. You don't have to be in that state to take advantage of 988. The Crisis Lifeline, or any crisis lifeline, is designed to help us through whatever crisis we're dealing with. And grief is a big part of that. So if I had known that I could have picked up the phone and talked to someone who maybe didn't know me and didn't know my situation, and I could be a little anonymous, I think it would have been hugely valuable to me. And that there are support groups, whether they be virtual, whether they be in person, just knowing that there are safe spaces like that to be able to have these conversations with people who understand. That's the thing.
Yes.
It's one thing to talk to somebody and have somebody hold space for you.
Yes. Which is lovely and rare in and of itself.
It's wonderful.
Yes.
And so helpful. It's an entirely different situation dynamic outcome conversation when you're talking to somebody who has experienced the kind of loss that you're experiencing. Now, I say that fully understanding that even though there are so many similarities with suicide and what we all go through, it's unique to each one of us.
Of course it is.
That loss is slightly different, depends on the dynamic, the chemistry, the circumstances, the situation.
One of the things, and I do want to say that I talked to you about this before we were recording because I wouldn't spring this on somebody, but many, many people believe, and this is a distorted thinking, but it's still a belief, that they're doing it for their family, for their loved one, that it is an act of love to remove the burden that is me from your life. And I don't ever want to present suicide as a loving gesture. That's a dangerous thing to do. But I also think that there may be some loss survivors who would take a little comfort knowing that that may be what was in someone's mind and not, I don't give a damn about my family. Is that something you can talk to?
I would love to talk about that specifically, and I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. It's so easy for the people who are left behind to blame themselves for everything. What we have to remember is that the reason why our person chose to take their life was not about us. It's not about us at all. It's about them. And that one act, that final act, was the only act that they had complete control over. So when they're taking their life, choosing to do that, they're choosing to do that because they're in so much pain that they just need it to end. They need it to stop. And sure, I'm sure in a lot of cases, the person who's struggling does feel like they may be a burden to their family. But they're not trying to leave you if you're a partner, or if you're the child, or if you're a family member or a friend. They're not leaving because of you. They're leaving because they're in pain and they don't want to be in pain anymore.
Does that understanding help at all?
I know it helps me. It definitely has helped me.
When you said that with your father there were no red flags, he seemed to have a joy for life, all the things that would, weren't there warning signs? No. I think we need to address the families and the people for whom there were warning signs. And there may have been warning signs for years, and they may have done all the right things, everything they knew to do, and they may have brought in the kind of help that we encourage people to bring in, and it can still end in death. And those people carry a different grief and carry a different load. What do you say to them? That's such a hard place to live and move forward from.
That is a really hard place to move forward from. And to be honest, I would say, you know what you did. Mm-hmm. You know how you supported your person.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, where there's a will, there's a way. And sometimes with some people, nothing you can say, nothing you can do, no amount of help or counseling or medication can fix the problem. And sometimes things happen in spite of our best efforts to stop them from happening. And it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And it doesn't matter what anybody in the outside world says or thinks or believes, because it's no one else's life. It's no one else's situation. It's no one else's loss. So it's wasted energy to be affected by somebody else's impression of what you went through. I would say, you know in your heart what you did, how you tried to support your person. And sometimes, unfortunately, someone can't get the help that they need when they need it.
For those of you grieving a loss by suicide, whenever it may have happened, Lisa has a closing message for you that we really hope you're able to take in.
That immediate devastation,
Yeah.
if you're in the thick of it right now, there's nothing that's going to make you believe that that will ever end and that that will ever change. it does change. You don't grieve less. You don't mourn less. It's just different. I don't want to even say that it's muted or less in some way, because it's not. It's neither of those things. I would just say, take heart that the way that you feel right now is not always the way that you're going to feel. I'm not going to say you'll be over it, because we never are. And I wouldn't want to be.
Right.
I wouldn't want to stop grieving for my dad or for anybody else who I've lost, because grief is love. So I would just say, trust in the fact that as you move forward at your own pace, you will not always feel the way that you feel right now. There is another side to it.
Oh, Lisa, thank you so much for sharing that message with our listeners, because it is so hard to believe it when you're getting so many messages from people who don't get it, that it's going to be better, it's going to be better. But to hear from you based on your experience that it might not always feel the way that it feels to some people right now is hugely heartening.
It makes such a difference when the person speaking knows a similar loss.
Yeah. And one of the things that Lisa is encouraging us to do here is to name the folks that we've lost. I really think that piece of advice will come as a surprise to a lot of listeners. It definitely came as a surprise to me, because I didn't think it was sensitive to do that. Have you ever had that worry?
I am sure I have. In the last 9 years interviewing survivors, I have heard, I think I can say unanimously, that people do want to talk about the person they lost, and they want to know that that person played a role in your life too. Please bring her up. Please bring them up. You know, it lets me know it's okay to talk if I want to, and it lets me know that you still remember them and you're keeping their memory alive as well. So I do think it's critical. And I think that pretending that someone is not carrying that load is doing them a disservice.
Yeah.
And maybe a relationship.
That's really, yeah. I think that there are folks that when after grief and as they go through it, that there's a way that they can sort of tell that you can't handle their grief. And so the relationship gets squeezed or constrained in some way where they don't feel like they get to be their real selves with you or maybe around anybody. One of the resources that Lisa names is the Trevor Project, which I personally agree with her for years was really an amazing resource for LGBTQ youth who were going through a moment or mental health crisis or feeling suicidal. And that project has recently been defunded, but Canada opened up a toll-free line for LGBTQ youth. So all Americans or anyone in North America can still call this toll-free number, which is 1-877-330-6366. Again, that's 1-877-330-6366.
And in general, it's important to know or good to know that we define what a crisis is for us. And it may well be that you're actively suicidal, but it might be something different. And you can call and talk about it with somebody who is trained to listen, trained to make space, and has likely heard it before. And there's a real comfort in knowing that someone's not going to be like, wait, what? You're thinking what?
Yeah.
They will not be shocked. They can help you, and they can give you some resources. They can have a conversation with you, which a lot of people aren't comfortable having. So whatever crisis line, it is a huge and tremendous resource. And having worked at one, I know how many people called just to, I shouldn't say just, to connect with someone, to have somebody be there when they called. So you say hello and someone says hello back, and you say, I'm having a hard time. And it's like, talk to me. I think people are hesitant to call them, and I think that they are a tremendous resource. And I recommend that people call them just to see, you know, not necessarily even wait until you're in a crisis. Just dial 988 and say, I just wanted to know how this works, because one of the things you'll learn is that there's a delay between you dialing and it being routed and someone answering. And that's not because they don't care, and it's not because you're not important, and it's not because they're may not be urgency to your call. It's because that's how the phones work. And so might help you to know that before you actually need to talk to someone.
That's such a good reminder.
I'll tell you one story, which is kind of interesting. When I worked at the crisis line, there was a person who would call. And once we were talking, and all of a sudden he says, hold on a second. And I hear him, place an order at a drive-through. And I was kind of like, wait, what? You're calling a crisis line and you're ordering food? And I went and talked to my manager, and he looked at me and said, the person who you were talking to has debilitating social anxiety. And he probably couldn't have left the house to get a meal to eat that night if you hadn't been there with him holding his hand.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Also, just don't be so judgmental, Terry. But it was really interesting to me. And I have not had that same reflex to be judgmental since, because you never know. You just never know what somebody else is going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last thing that I just want to name, a lot of these lines now you can text.
Yep.
Or they have online chats where you're not speaking with AI, you're speaking with a trained person who is on the other end of that chat. Also, sometimes people are in a place where they don't feel like they can say out loud, right? You're sitting at work, or you're in a public place and you don't feel comfortable with that. Because sometimes finding the words and actually saying it might be even harder for some people than I have the words, but I don't feel comfortable saying them out loud yet. But they really are such an important resource that we can be even more intentional and creative about using, because good resources are hard to come by. And 988 and this Canada hotline and so many more really are designed to support people. And a lot of people need support right now.
Yep. Now and always. Indeed. So thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Carly. And we'll be back next week and hope you'll join us again.
We really hope that this discussion helps give some language or context to your own depression, or ideas for how to support someone else in your life living with it. We invite you to check out the hundreds of episodes in our archive and to explore both the Resource Hub and treatment options on recovery.com. Depression is too dark a road to walk alone.
We'll be back next week.